scientists successfully photographed a black hole, landed rover on Mars, and sent spacecraft to the dark side of the moon. Yet, one of the last unknown frontiers, and one of the most deceptively familiar, is on our very own trusty planet. Hi everyone, I'm Ishika, and I hope I gave you a little clue as to what I'm going to talk about today. We're going to cover a lot of ground, or should I say surface. That joke will become exceedingly clear in a few moments. Before I begin, I do want to get one thing out of the way. My peers who talk before or after me will talk about issues that are equally, if not more important, from a more socioeconomic prism of problems. However, the issue that I have chosen today to present is probably underrepresented not only in this panel but also in general public domain because we know about it. We get it, but we just don't talk about enough. The point being, the flurry of recognition that it gets, that it receives, is just not appropriate for a region that covers 70% of our planet, provides half of the air we breathe, courtesy the microscopic phytoplanktons floating all around it. Yet, much of it remains a mystery. All right, let's dive into it, pun intended. Today, in my 12-minute address, I'll be exploring the realities of the oceans and mapping the extended impact on communities. And the reason I say dependent communities is because it can be categorized into two buckets. One is coastal centers and one is marine life. Tackling the coastal stakeholders first, climate change may seem far off for most of us, but for the people belonging to the fishing community in fisheries are already seeing a major impact caused by it. So in order to categorize the vulnerability and resilience in fishing communities, I'd like to take an example to illustrate how the changing fish distributions can affect the entire ecosystem. So imagine a pre-event, a thriving fishing community, and they depend on a single species of fish. They have a lot of events around it. There's very strong community ties. There are annual fish fries, annual fish events, fish festivals, etc. Cut to a new stock assessment, which indicates that the primary fish species is being overfished, which is a very common problem. And the Fishery Management Council, of course, reacts to it by cutting down the ACL or the annual catch limit by X pounds. So the immediate adaptive response by the community is a lot of families move away in search of better livelihoods. Some people reduce their crew size. Some people cut down on their fish, on their vessels. Someone shuts down their fish house. The community ties weaken. There are no longer any festivals being conducted. So bottom line is, in this particular example, the fish distribution pattern got disturbed because of overfishing, but there could be a host of reasons why, how it can initiate this negative domino effect wherein a community's resilience is really challenged. It increases their danger, their vulnerability, and also leads to disruption in the socioeconomic ecosystem. So talking in a bit more practical sense of the word, there's a report by Terry that says that more than 5,700 square kilometers along the coastal region will be inundated, and almost 7.1 million of the coastal population will be directly impacted. So imagine some years down the line, some coastal centers are completely wiped off of the map, the world map. They're submerged, and even as per UNEP, India is one of the 27 countries that will face one of the worst consequences of sea level rise caused by thermal expansion of the ocean due to ocean water due to global warming. But that's not where the bad news ends, of course, as there's another community at stake that we talked about. So we don't just want to talk about people, humans in general who got directly impacted because of their source of livelihood, but also organisms that live in it, that inhabit that ecosystem, which is, of course, the endangered species and ecosystem along those coastal belts. So rise in sea level is not just related to inundation or pushing back of the coastline, but also just displacing that biological diversity. For example, India is home to some of the most rich, diverse biological diversity and organisms, including mangrove forests and coral reefs. Side note, coral reefs take a lot of time to recover as per biologists. They just take a lot of time to heal in case any damage is done to them. And the real tragedy is that the fishermen or the communities contributing the least to global warming are going to be impacted the most. In fact, a 1 meter sea level rise will inundate 6,000 kilometers in India, of which Mumbai, Kolkata, and Chennai will be directly impacted. So this distinct ecosystem and this distinct threat, that's being posed with 3 of the 6 major metropolitan areas situated within it, will lead to billions of dollars and assets of losses, not only in terms of human capital, but also infrastructure, social, physical assets. And unfortunately, civil society can do little about it on its own because of the massive scale of the problem. Trying to switch gears here a little bit, we talked so far about the impact, but what about the threats? So I like to categorize the threat into buckets of waste and commercial fishing because these are the most pressing, I believe. One is overfishing, which is we have methodically depleted all our fish stocks, practically speaking. So first we exhausted those that we could catch with small boats and small rods along the coastline, the surface ones, and then we went deeper. We went further and we started overfishing herring and tuna, those species. And then the last stroke, we went deeper and caught species such as orange ruffy that we know has a lifespan of 150 years, and they don't start breeding until they're 20 years old. So essentially what we're doing is there's this general ideology or like a general word to the wise that we should not consume food products or consume species that are older than us, because we should feed off of those who are closer, lower down in the food chain, so that they can reproduce quickly and we're not disturbing the numbers of those species. And oceans are like a fridge full of fish, and we have just ran out of stock here. Second that I want to talk about is waste. So I often say this, I don't know about God, but plastic is truly everywhere. So industrial agriculture is pouring nitrogen and phosphorus, reactive nitrogen phosphorus into the oceans from rivers practically all around the world, and that is causing dead zones to crop up. So these dead zones are spots of ocean that have no oxygen, they're like a vacuum, and they don't bear life. So that's really I think problematic in the sense, because if those areas are not bearing life, that portion of ocean is not bearing any life, that has a very direct, not indirect, completely direct effect on the marine life in those areas, and that probably had home there, habitat there, and used to breathe there. And second is regenerative capacity. So, our planet, our earth, soil, we have a regenerative capacity. It has a sort of mechanism to replenish itself. And even oceans have it. So oceans used to have this, as a general, they used to have this capacity to replenish and revive themselves. So if you put in toxins and pollutants in there, they know how to flush it out of the system, and they know how to get itself back to its pristine form. But if I throw two problems at you, you'd probably say, okay, I can solve that, I can multitask. But if it's 300 or 3,000, one might give up. One might say, what are we doing here? So that's exactly what's happening. They're losing that ability to get itself back to its pure form and deal with that level of plastic pollution. So that brings us to a pivotal point. It almost seems that there is a lack of respect for ocean life, and I think that stems from the problem of out of sight ideology. So there are three areas of life where this is applicable. So one is waste disposal. So it's almost like out of sight, out of mind. We throw the waste in the oceans. We release the toxic chemical waste from the industries, hoping that it would just take care of itself. It doesn't. And the second is, we see the dogs and domesticated animals all around us. We don't really see marine life, maybe because they're not immediately in our very immediate physical environment present. So it's almost difficult for humans to empathize that we are causing serious damage there, because say any water body, lake, pond, whatever, is probably several kilometers away from your home or whatever. And that leads to a disconnect. And we were unable to empathize with what's really going on there. And third probably is that 95% of the ocean is unexplored. So we don't really know, we can't imagine, see how, about those deep sea creatures. So again, it speaks to that missing link, that we don't really know what's out there. How do we know? Why should we protect them? How should we protect them? So there's this general disconnect there. We only know, as per science, we only have good information about less than 5% of the world oceans. When I first read about this statistic, I was blown away. And we only have like sparse information on the rest of the 10%. So almost 85%, we don't know anything out there. That's all unexplored, untouched territory. Not so much untouched, but yes, unexplored for sure. And so, biologists often raise this question, or agencies, governments also often raise this question: how do we protect areas that we don't know so little about? Herein lies the catch-22. We need exploration to collect more information, right? But many agencies and governments are reluctant to fund those projects because there are so many unknown variables associated with it. So what's the good news? Well, the good news lies in a study conducted by PNAS, which found that protecting an additional 5% of the oceans, so that is in the form of MPAs or marine protected areas. So protecting additional 5% of the oceans can increase the fish yields by 20%. So right now, so far, the conservation efforts have been seen from the point of view of just pure conservation, protection. But now a more incentive gets roped in, because we can also increase, so we're also incentivizing the fishing communities and coastal nations here if they adopt the MPAs, because and expand the MPAs, because that is leading to a dual benefit here, and of course presents a good image that we are doing something about our posterity. So in conclusion, since we know so little about, and we have such a little grasp and complete understanding of how one change affects the entire ecosystem, it is probably in the interest of all and the benefit of all that we sort of leave it right now. We have to go and say, we don't know all about it, so let's leave it for the meantime. We shouldn't take a lackadaisical approach of an ignorance is bliss approach, that we don't know what's out there, so let's just, whatever we're doing. No, we need to protect it. Let's just leave it alone for a while. First, get more information on it, and then decide how we go about it. So, it's one of those issues where it doesn't present an imminent threat to us today, but tomorrow is too late to do about it. So the good news is that scientists do know how to replenish the fish stocks. They do know that by creating MPAs, there have been potential benefits, and by creating fish regeneration zones, we know how to replenish our fish stocks and how to fish sustainably, sustainable fishing practices. So now it's no longer a question of knowledge, but of will. We could take action today if we want to. Thank you to the viewers, thank you to the listeners, thank you to the entire Team at Fair project for bringing me this opportunity. You've been a great guide throughout, from the get-go, and you've helped us all develop this sort of understanding as to how we want to approach the socioeconomic problems, and you've made such a memorable experience for all of us, so thank you to that. And just a small disclaimer before I go, I have used a lot of information from different sources on the internet, since I wanted to bring across as much accurate information as possible, and since it was a little statistic heavy. So that's all from my side. Thank you so much.